Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing? If you're new here, my name is Luca, and in today's video we are going to be talking about books. So, as usual, if you haven't yet got yourself a little beverage, go ahead and pour yourself one. I have decided to go for a coffee today. That's my choice. I've also stolen my dad's mug, which was his Christmas present. Sorry about that, Dad, but I'm really curious as to the experience of drinking out of this bad boy. So I've stolen that for today's video. This week's video is actually a suggestion from my friend Sam. Often when I'm talking about books, the question that I do actually for real get asked about a lot is, how do I manage to read as many books as I do? And the answer to that is always gonna be audiobooks. Probably about 50% of the books that I read in a year are audiobooks. I can't recommend them enough. I used to be a part of the crowd that thought that audiobooks didn't really count as reading. I know, I'm ashamed to admit it. I still prefer a physical copy over a Kindle copy, edition, whatever it's called, or an audiobook. However, the practicality of a Kindle book is undeniable, and audiobooks also very practical, and also just a great way to go through more books throughout the year. I personally love listening to sort of thrillers, rom-coms, and anything that is non-fiction in an audio format. It means that I can listen to it when I'm going to work. I also like to listen to audiobooks when I'm doing chores around the house, and I also find that it helps me be a lot more productive. So whenever I have chores and I'm kind of putting them off and I know that I need to do them, the minute I put an audiobook on, that's it. I could clean for quite a few hours. To conclude, the best way for me to read more books is audiobooks. And so my friend Sam said and suggested that it would be a good idea for a video to talk about which audiobooks I personally think improved my experience of a certain book, which books I wouldn't have enjoyed as much if I hadn't read the audiobook. Does that make sense? Wait, this is really difficult for some reason to say. I have selected, is it really dark in here? Hang on. Is that better? I can't tell. Anyway. Why is this so difficult to say? I can do this. I've selected a few books that I think the audiobook enhanced my experience overall. And I've also selected a few books that I don't think I would have read if it weren't for the audiobook. Does that make sense? Essentially, some of these are going to be audiobooks that I think are better than the actual physical copy. Hopefully you catch my drift. Hopefully that was clear. I was looking at my Goodreads, and so I do have a whole shelf dedicated to all the audiobooks that I've read. And in total, I've read 86 audiobooks, and I think I only started reading audiobooks 2 years ago, or listening to audiobooks 2 years ago, so that's pretty damn good. First book that I wanted to talk about, and I'm not doing them in any particular order, but the first book, by the way, if I'm looking down here, is because I have my notes, because today I am organized, guys. I have a desk, I have my ring light, and I'm really digging this setup. Today, I am a new and improved Luca. Sippy sip. Oh, that's lovely. The first book that I wanted to talk about today was 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This is one of my favorite books of all time. This is a retelling of the infamous 10-year-long Trojan War, told through the different perspectives of all the women involved, be it in the consequences or in the causes. This was truly a gift to listen to. It's gorgeous, it's poignant, and the characterization is so formidable that you become immediately involved and connected with the women. Even if that particular POV only lasts for like a couple of chapters, sometimes it's only a few pages. Natalie Haynes is such a wonderful author. Her writing is so enchanting. I remember I was gripped from the start, from the very beginning. Natalie Haynes brings these women to life, and I felt their pain and their loss and their suffering so vividly. The storylines are so intricately woven together, and it's so brilliant. I particularly loved Penelope's sort of story. I have actually read the Odyssey, and so it was really interesting to see what she must have been feeling during those years and how she must have lived through it and what it must have been like from her end. Her letters written to Odysseus really made me laugh out loud at some points, but they also screamed of the pain that she must have felt. I highly recommend going through this as an audiobook because it is narrated by Natalie Haynes herself, and her voice is so full of emotion. It's just perfect for storytelling, and I even had a little tear at the end. It's left a big impact on me, so I highly recommend the audiobook for this one. The next book that I wanted to talk about is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. You might recognize Celeste Ng's name because she also wrote Little Fires Everywhere, which was a really big hit at one point, and I remember everyone was sort of talking about it on BookTube. I have read both, and I think I read Little Fires Everywhere first, and then when I read Everything I Never Told You, I didn't connect the dots. I didn't realize that it was another Celeste Ng book, so I kind of didn't have any expectations going into it. Everything I Never Told You is about Lydia Lee, who is one of 3 siblings, I believe, and in the book, at the very, very beginning, this isn't a spoiler, she passes away. And so Everything I Never Told You is a character study. It's a thought-provoking exploration into childhood and family life. It's about the death of hopes and dreams, which I know sounds very, very dramatic. It's also about the burden of family expectations, and it treats topics such as sexism, racism, but it's about all of these things without making them the main focus of the book, because the real focus at the heart of it all is about grief. So when Lydia dies, when that happens, it's also the death of her parents' vicarious hopes and ideals. Ng is outstandingly brilliant at her craft. She's incredibly talented. Her prose is beautiful, and her writing is quite subtle, which just allows for a bigger impact. Just like in Little Fires Everywhere, there are moments of her writing that just make you stop and admire. The timeline perfectly intertwines the past and the present, and the lead up to Lydia's death and then the aftermath. The center of this book, the tragedy, which is Lydia's death, is simply a platform off of which Celeste Ng can explore family dynamics and give precise observations on racial and patriarchal barriers. The family dynamics and each of the characters' personal motivations and actions are so intricately and cleverly constructed that it explains away any sort of seemingly unjustified behavior and feelings. Unlike with Little Fires Everywhere, I formed a greater attachment to the characters, especially the Lee children, because let's be honest, their dad, James, is absolute garbage. He can burn in hell. Sorry, harsh. All of them are so three-dimensional that it's difficult to believe that they're not real people that exist outside of the realm of fiction, and it's difficult to sort of imagine that you can't meet these people on the street because of how well written they are. And the reason I'd recommend the audiobook for this one is because it just really helped bring the characters to life. There's a bloody chicken at the door staring at me. I'm not doing this today. No siree. Let me go lock that door. I've dealt with the chicken situation. We're safe. I hate chickens. And the next book that I wanted to talk about is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. If you have not heard of this, have you even been on the internet? I'm just joking. But it has been everywhere, and I'm really glad that Jeanette McCurdy is getting the attention and receiving all of this praise for her book, because this book was probably my favorite book of 2022. However, I will say, I know that because of the hype, a lot of people will be really excited to read this book. I would recommend that before you're going into it, you look at the trigger warnings for it, because there are quite a few, and yeah, if you think that anything might be too much, I would sit this one out. Jeanette McCurdy writes an incredibly moving and deeply honest memoir depicting childhood stardom and abuse. The thing about memoirs is that just not all celebrities should write one. However, McCurdy's genuine passion for writing and for what she's talking about is so transparent throughout the pages, and you can really tell that she has got a talent for it and she's good at it and she is passionate about it. I personally was never a Nickelodeon kid. I didn't grow up watching the Disney Channel. I didn't really know anything about Jennette McCurdy, and although I do think that for people who did watch her, my mother's calling me, hang on. Mum was very impressed by my setup, so that's good. Anyway, where was I? Let me take that back from the beginning. I was saying that growing up, I was never a Nickelodeon kid. I didn't watch the Disney Channel. I didn't really know anything about Jennette McCurdy. And although I do think that for people who did grow up with her and grew up watching her, it will hit harder, I still think that McCurdy's voice is worth listening to for those who haven't. She tells her story chronologically, masterfully picking memories to depict her relationship with her mother. She covers a large variety of different topics: the dangers of fame and this industry for children, dysfunctional families, eating disorders, OCD, therapy, alcoholism, unhealthy relationships in more than just familial, the pressure of financial instability, the loss of a childhood. I feel like a lot of people might be drawn to this book because they want the gossip about her co-stars, and her book is just so much more than that. And although if that is why people come to read the book, I hope that what they take away from it is more than that, because otherwise it would be such a disservice to Jennette. I thought that her book was just incredibly written. She recounts memories with such incredible detail. There are very difficult subjects, heartbreaking moments, and a lot of dark humor, which I think will resonate with people who have had similar experiences. McCurdy discusses subjects that are uncomfortable truths and are difficult to say, and she broaches so many subjects that would be difficult to talk about or to share and that are often shameful. She is honest about complicated and often, shameful feelings such as jealousy. She talks about her relationship with Ariana Grande and admits that it wasn't a good one because she was jealous that Ariana Grande was getting everything that she wanted and was seemingly doing so well, whilst Jennette McCurdy was turning up and working as hard as she possibly could and wasn't getting the same kind of merit and wasn't getting the same treatment. And she does do all of this whilst recognizing her now financial stability and her privilege with regards to that. She, talks about how thankful she is for that because she didn't always have it. I love the book. I think it was super impactful and I think it will reach a really large audience. And the audiobook, which is why I'm talking about this one, is incredible, and I would highly recommend it because obviously it is narrated by Jennette McCurdy herself, which just adds a whole new tone. She has a blunt tone and she perfectly balances seriousness with humor. I've loved watching interviews of her talking about this book, and it's just great listening to her tell the story. Obviously, she's an actress, so the way she narrates it is just incredibly engaging, and it's so emotional to hear her voice sort of break at certain moments, and she puts so much into it, which is why I recommend the audiobook for this particular book. There we go. Whew, moving on to the next. We're doing well, guys. The next one that I wanted to talk about is Dial A for Aunties, which is by Jessie Sutanto. Yes. If you are going to approach this story, then in order for you to enjoy it, you are going to have to suspend all of your disbeliefs. You're just going to have to go through this whole book, and any sort of chaos that is happening on the pages, you just have to nod and accept it, okay? Illegal stuff that's going down that would never happen, accept it. Lovey-dovey stuff thrown into the pages, accept it. Any sort of people acting in a nonsensical manner, accept it. Just bear in mind that going into this book, the word of the day is going to have to be, I don't know what I'm doing with this, by the way, it's just, anyway, the word of the day is going to have to be acceptance. if you are to enjoy it. Dial A for Aunties is extremely silly. It's over the top. It's kind of ridiculous. It exaggerates. It's unbelievable. The lighting is going to change because the sun's coming out, I apologize. However, it does achieve exactly what it set out to be, and that is fun and light-hearted. To give you a quick rundown about what it is about, essentially, it is about our main character. I can't remember her name. She has a business with her aunties where they cater weddings. I don't know if that's the right word. They organize weddings all together, and they each have their specific speciality. And so, you know, the main character is a photographer, so she sort of takes care of that side of things. One of her aunties is a hairdresser, and she does the makeup and all the rest of it. Another one does food, I believe. So they all work together, and they've built this sort of business together, and they are preparing for a wedding. I think it's for a very big client. And as you're going along, there are a lot of elements that are thrown into this book. It's a little bit confused. Is it a thriller? Is it a rom-com? Is it a sort of character study or like a family study? I don't know. It's a bit confusing. But along the way, our main character goes on a date, and again, this isn't a spoiler, I believe it's told in the blurb, but she accidentally murders him, and her aunties have to conceal the body whilst organizing this wedding. It's completely insane. Even just me explaining it, you're kind of like, what the hell? And just add a little bit of extra spice. On top of that, I believe it's her ex is also at this wedding, and so there's like this tension between them, and she's trying to hide a body, and everything that could go wrong is going wrong. If you want to enjoy it, don't take it too seriously. It is highly entertaining. It is really fun. The romance, it kind of feels like something that's straight out of a teenager's fan fiction. Sutanto really gives us nothing on that front. The ex is kind of just all like infatuated with the main character for no reason. Like, Nathan was just like an empty shell of a character. He was just this besotted ex, and you don't know why. However, the savior of this book, and the reason it was so enjoyable and the reason I would recommend it, is because of the aunties. They broke their backs carrying this book. Their banter and sarcasm and sort of familial antics are the pillars of the book. All the best moments involved these four women. Essentially, Dial A's for Aunties is an extremely entertaining and silly little book that sort of dips into the territory of farce and the ridiculous for humor, and I would just recommend it. The reason I think the audiobook is a good way to go through it, and I wouldn't have read it without the audiobook, is because it just brings the characters to life. I feel like that's going to be the case for most audiobooks, but in this case it's what kept me going, because I could kind of just zone out for any of the moments that weren't as entertaining, and it's just so easy to listen to it. And again, if there are bits that you're not that interested in, you can just have it on in the background whilst you're doing something else, and then you can sort of engage once again once the aunties come back on, and it's just a very quick, easy read, and that's why I'm recommending the audiobook for this one. Okay, the next book that I'm going to talk about is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Let me tell you, I never ever would have believed that I would ever pick up a Talia Hibbert book. I was convinced that it would never ever happen. At the time when this came out, it was super duper popular, and I remember that everyone was recommending it left and right. Whether you were into romance or not, people were recommending it and saying, I never liked romance, but then I read this book and now I really like rom-coms and all the rest of it. So just one day I was having a little look for an audiobook. I didn't know what to listen to. I saw it and I was like, fuck it. And you know what? I devoured it, and I went through the series so quickly. This book is one of the books that essentially got me into a whole new genre. It's what introduced me to rom-coms, and it's what made me a little bit open-minded and made me think, okay, I can go out of my comfort zone and I can try new books. Very quickly, to give you a little rundown of what this book is about. This book is about Chloe Brown, who is one of the Brown sisters, and she decides that because of her chronic pain, she's sort of been a little bit scared to go out and experience things, and she decides that, you know what, I'm going to make a list of all of the things that I want to achieve. And some of them are things that she can achieve by herself, and some of them are a little more difficult, and she is going to need the help of a second party. Is that the correct word? Of someone else, such as camping, for example. She needs someone else to help her out. And so she sets out on a mission to recruit, I think he's her neighbor. She sets out on a mission to recruit him so that he can help her with all of these things. And as you have probably guessed, feelings enter the bloody chat. I had an absolute blast reading this book. It was such a welcome surprise. I loved, again, the banter, the family dynamics. I loved the humor. Hibbert has just written a very funny, compassionate, heartwarming little clever book. There's something in it for everyone to enjoy, and it feels like one big hug. Talia Hibbert is also known for her inclusivity, and that's definitely the case for this book. I felt that Chloe was such a brilliant... There's the chicken again. Fine, concentrate, Luca. What was I saying? I feel that Chloe is just such an exceptional protagonist. She's extremely witty, she's clever. I loved her vernacular, I thought it was great fun. And she just has these endless rants, which are everything. There's a lot of great representation in this book. So we have a leading black woman who struggles with chronic pain, and then the love interest is recovering from an abusive relationship. This all sounds very dark, but it's not. It's very fun. I love Gigi, the cat, the sisters, the build-up, the banter, the tension, the love to hate, the character development. And again, the reason that I'm recommending this one as an audiobook is simply because I think that rom-coms are a great way to go through these... Wait, what? The reason I'm recommending it as an audiobook is because I feel that it's just the best way to go through a rom-com, so I highly suggest for this book to pick up the audiobook. And then, if you enjoy it, you have the other two books. Quick little side note on that, I didn't like the second book, but I like the third one, so there you go. The next book I want to talk about is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is another memoir that definitely captivated a large audience and gained a lot of popularity. It's an incredibly personal book. Again, I was saying this earlier, any memoir is going to be undeniably personal. But in this case, it felt like the author was writing it more for herself. Crying in a H Mart is another one of those books that I was kind of just browsing for my next audiobook and it popped up on my Scribd page, and so I decided to start listening to it, and the minute I heard Michelle Zauner's voice, I was captivated. I had heard plenty of people describing this book as absolutely stunning and heartbreaking, and I had also heard that it made a lot of people's mouths water. It was so easy to listen to her. Crying in H Mart is about Michelle Zauner's relationship with her parents, in particular her mother. It's about her identity and grief, and it's also about the food associated with her culture and her mother. It's absolutely lovely. I might not be the most well-versed in memoirs, but I do believe that this is how they should be written. I was heartbroken, and then I would be heartwarmed. I would cry, and then I would smile. It shattered me, and then it put me back together, and it was just truly a gift. That's all I'm going to say on this one. I think that it was just masterfully written, and Michelle Zauner is incredibly talented at her craft, but she put so much into this book, and I think for anyone who has lost a parent, this will really resonate with them, as you get her voice, and her voice was beautiful. Again, just one of the best ways to go through a memoir. I think this is the last one we're coming up to. Yes, okay, so I couldn't do a book, wait, what? I couldn't do a video about audiobooks without mentioning this book. I have already ranted about this one quite a lot, but it just didn't feel right to not include it into this video. You might have guessed, you might not have guessed, but the book that I'm going to be talking about is Gideon the Ninth by Tasman Muir. Yes, that book. Again, I mentioned this before, but I have owned this book for years and I never picked it up. I tried one chapter once, and because it was so complicated and it was just difficult to kind of get into, and I wasn't in the right headspace for it at the time, I put it down, and then I never really picked it up again until I was watching one of Carrie Can Read's videos about this book. And so I finally picked it up because she convinced me. I started to try going for it with the physical copy and realized that it was quite difficult, and so I picked up the audiobook, and I truly believe that if I hadn't picked up the audiobook, there is no way that I would have read this book, and that would have been a huge shame because it turns out that this is one of my all-time favorite books. So as I was saying when I was talking about this the first time around, I hadn't read high sci-fi or fantasy in quite a while, so trying to read this book, it was just mental gymnastics. It was a lot for my brain to sort of wrap around and comprehend. Obviously, if you're accustomed to reading fantasy and it's the genre that you read the most, then I'm sure you will have no issue with this book, but because it had been a while for me and I've been reading a lot more of contemporary, actually that doesn't matter, but because I hadn't been reading it in a while, it just meant that my brain wasn't ready to sort of do the leaps and bounds that were necessary for me to familiarize myself with these new characters and picture them and understand them as actual characters and not just a few words on a page. It was difficult for me to visualize the world that they existed in and to follow all of these action scenes and to just really get a grasp on the world. So it took me a while to get into it, but the audiobook absolutely saved me. I decided to read both the audiobook and the physical book simultaneously to sort of complement each other, and I feel that the audiobook was such a fantastic way of going through it because it really helped me better understand certain tones in the book. It really helped bring the characters to life. It helped bring out the humor. I feel like a lot of it would have just gone way over my head if I hadn't had the audiobook to better understand what the author was trying to get across and what I was supposed to be getting from the book. The characters voices were also distinct. The narrator gave such an incredible performance, and I just couldn't recommend it enough. I don't think I would have been able to appreciate this book if it hadn't been for the audiobook. So I would highly recommend for anyone else who is trying to get back into fantasy to go through a book this way. And again, you don't have to like full on, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the word. You don't have to full on just listen to the audiobook. You don't have to just go through the physical book. You could do both like I did. And yeah, I just think that if you're someone who hasn't been reading this kind of genre in a while, it will really help you go through it. And yeah, just like it did for me. Very, very quickly to explain what Gideon the Ninth is about. Gideon the Ninth is about a lesbian necromancer in space. What more do you need? It's kind of difficult to wrap your head around to begin with. I think that's okay because even if you aren't fully familiarized with the world and the politics and the magic system, you can still enjoy it because of the characters and the banter. The two main characters, Harrow and Gideon, I loved their relationship together. It was so much fun and entertaining, and yeah, I would highly recommend that you give it a go. So there we go. I think we were quick, we were concise. Hopefully this has helped you find a few new books to add to your TBR maybe, and also convinced you to try an audiobook. I highly recommend it. I could never go back now that I have started. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. If you've watched it all the way to the ending, thank you very, very much. As a gift for watching it all the way to the ending, hang on. If you watched it all the way to the ending, you get to see Freewee. Say hi, Freewee. Okay, Bye, freebie. It would be a true honor if you decided to like and subscribe, but you know, don't feel like you have to or anything. But like, you'd be a really good person if you did, so. And I will see you very, very soon in my next video. Thank you to Sam for recommending this idea as well. Great. Goodbye.